Ever wonder if there's intelligent life elsewhere in the universe? Well, I have. I've been wondering since I was a kid. My name is Reuben Langdon, and on March 29th, 2007, in the middle of the day, I saw a number of strange objects in the sky. Coincidentally, I was working on the film Avatar at the time, playing an alien. And ever since then, I've been on a quest. A quest to find out if aliens really do exist, and if so, are they here, with us? If beings of higher intelligence are here, what is their purpose? Why don't they make themselves more known? Why the secrecy? I've asked these questions to many experts, yet each seems to have a different theory. So I thought to myself, why not ask the aliens directly? So that's what I set out to do. Well, sort of.
Here we are with Barbara Lamb, and we're in your lovely home. Thank you for inviting us in.
Thank you.
And I'd love to just kind of get to know you and get to know your work. You've been in the extraterrestrial field, crop circle field, hypnotherapist, regression field for quite a while, and I'd like to
many years.
Yeah, I'd like to get into some of those experiences if we could. And first, could you just tell us kind of what your background is? I know you've probably said this a million times, but
it's okay.
Just for the new audience,
sure.
And just explain, your body of work.
Basically, I'm a licensed psychotherapist, licensed in the state of California in 1976. So that's many years ago, and I began to notice that part of my work just seemed to evolve into, with some people anyway, doing what I was calling deep relaxation work, or altered states of consciousness work. It just sort of evolved, and I didn't realize in some of those early years, in the 1970s and early 80s, that I was actually doing hypnosis with some people, just with some clients in my therapy practice where seemed like it would be useful. And then people began to bring it to my awareness that I was doing hypnosis.
Oh, okay.
So I thought, well, I really ought to get officially trained in that if I'm doing it.
Right.
And had a couple of training courses and felt very, very comfortable with that. And in 1984, I became aware of the Association for Past Life Research and Therapies, because I'd been having some spontaneous experiences of what certainly seemed to be like memories or sort of bleed-throughs from previous lifetimes. And particularly that was happening when I went to Peru and Egypt in the early 1980s, and some other countries too. And in certain locations, these really detailed memories would come up. And I'd give myself over to them to see how much I could remember. Now, I know that it wasn't fantasy. It wasn't daydream, and I was awake in these places. So I figured, well, I wonder if they could really be coming from previous lifetimes. Up to that point of view, up to that time, I just had not thought about past lives.
Right.
Just wasn't in my reference.
Right.
But I began to think, well, maybe we really do have lots of lifetimes, and maybe that remembering what happened in certain lifetimes could be useful therapeutically, so that when I met the past life therapy professional organization, I was really quite thrilled. And I went for 5 years of training with them
wow.
to be a past life regression therapist. And at the very last module of training, which was 1988 or possibly 1999, the trainer, whom I respected very much as a therapist, she said, those of you who are doing this regression therapy work need to know that it could happen that sometimes somebody will come to you who's had very unusual experiences with beings from somewhere else who are not human coming into their environment and sometimes taking them away for an hour or two.
Wow. So they mentioned this in the course you were taking.
They mentioned it in the course. They didn't
Wow.
really call them extraterrestrials or
Okay.
aliens, but
What year was this?
1988 or 89.
Okay. So they were already tapping in.
Yes, some of
As a
those therapists
group, or-
already were.
Okay.
I hadn't known that till
Right.
that moment. But the most striking thing to me was not only did this trainer say that, which was news to me.
Right.
I had just never thought in those terms. But even more striking was a big voice in my head, almost yelling to me in a demanding way. Nobody else around heard it, but I heard it in my head, seeming to come from somewhere else. And that voice said, "Pay attention to this, Barbara. You will be doing this."
Wow.
So, wow, there are other beings that come and take people away sometimes, and I'll be working with that. Well, that was a shock.
Wow.
And I felt from that point on that I needed to sort of pay attention to the UFO extraterrestrial phenomenon
Right.
to see if I thought it was really true.
Yeah. And this was before John Mack's work came out, right?
Yes,
This
I
was-
had never heard of John Mack.
Yeah.
I don't think he was doing that work yet.
Right.
So I found out then in the late 1980s that Bud Hopkins
Yeah.
was doing work, and David Jacobs, I think, at that
Right.
time, or at least a couple of years later.
Right.
And then I was at different lecture venues. I was seeing lots of videotapes of UFOs and photos of UFOs, and I began to think, I think this really must be really happening, even though I had not thought about it before.
Right.
And so by 1991, I felt at a certain point that if anybody would ever happen, what are the chances of that? But if ever somebody would come to me with complaints of that sort, that they had had experiences with these other beings, that I would be ready to handle that. And I was very experienced in regression therapy, and I figured that, I would just use the same techniques and
Right.
help somebody regress to an event that they had wondered about. So the very day that I decided on my own that I could handle that if it would ever come to me, a couple of hours later, I met a woman in a bookstore, and she said that she knew that I did this regression therapy work, and would I please work with her 21-year-old daughter, who was having these visitations, mostly at night, and she was hugely traumatized, devastatingly. She didn't even want to sleep in her room alone, because that's where these visitors would usually find her. And she was insisting on sleeping between her mother and father every night in their bedroom, and they were getting kind of tired of their 21-year-old daughter insisting on doing that.
Yeah, 21.
It's bad enough when it's a
past-
baby, but
yeah.
a 21-year-old daughter. So the mother and father were caring and understanding, but kind of fed up with this
Right.
and really wanted help for her. So she came for 6 sessions, and we did 6 regressions. And yes, indeed, the details showed that there was a variety of of what we now think of as extraterrestrial beings, who came to her on various occasions and did all kinds of things. Sometimes took her away, sometimes did some procedures on her right there when she was sleeping in the bedroom.
Wow.
Or they would take her from between her mother and father in their bed and sometimes take her onto a spacecraft, or sometimes just take her into her own room.
Wow.
Where they would be alone with her and be able to do certain procedures. And amongst those, one of the procedures was that they healed a bad ear infection that she had right there in her room. And she was lying on one side and they were working on the infected ear, and she could look around a little bit and see them. They were very tall, white, thin beings, definitely not human. And she was so improved from that ear problem, even the next morning, that she began to feel more kindly about these beings.
Right.
So after the 6th session she had with me, she came in one day and she was smiling and happy and looked very relaxed, and she said right away, "You know, I am privileged. I feel honored that I'm part of whatever this is, you could call it, that's going on. And I think it's great that for whatever reason, I've been chosen for this, because these beings are really helpful. They certainly are different looking and peculiar. They're not like us. They're not human, but they really are wonderful." And they had healed her not only the ear infection, but of lower back pain that she'd had for a considerable period of time.
Wow, can I get an alien visitation?
Yeah,
I've got
lots of
some low
people
back pain I gotta
would like to have that happen. Sometimes
All those stunts,
I
you know, after a while.
jokingly say to a friend or somebody I know who's having some pain or something, well, just ask the extraterrestrials. Now, I don't frankly think that the extraterrestrials come to just anybody, but they come to the people they're working with over a period of time. Anyway, that was my first client, and
Did they say,
and I thought, wow, I can really work with this, and it can turn out well.
Right.
You know, even though
positive, 'cause-
beginning in a very traumatizing way.
Right.
So a few months later, after visiting crop circles in England, another client came, and she worked with me for 11 or 12 years.
Wow.
We must have done at least 60 regressions to her extraterrestrial encounters. And her son was very involved with extraterrestrial visits and very positive about them. And she had an extraterrestrial mentor who was really wonderful to be with when she was on the spacecraft. And he also channeled. She realized after a few sessions with me that she was channeling very interesting information from that extraterrestrial being. So he was not only a mentor, a teacher, a guide to her on that craft when she was taken, but he also, when she was home or particularly in my office, he would channel through and give lots of interesting perspective from his planet, which was the binary star system, which we call Antares.
Antares, interesting.
And so that was really wonderful to get an off-planet, other take on Earth and human life and on their life and everything.
Well,
so
was she having negative experiences, or I say, was she traumatized when she went to see you, or was it, and then it developed into just figuring it out, or?
She had been, before she came to me, she was very baffled and confused and couldn't quite pin down what was going on. But she had, all of her life, been visited by 3 little white beings who were about 3 feet tall. And she called them my 3 little white guys. And she and her sister, who shared the bedroom all through their childhood years, the sister would wake up and witness time after time after time for years of these three little white beings coming. And
Did they
then
talk about it? Did her sister tell
they
her?
talked about it, and they liked it.
Oh, okay.
And what would happen is that the little beings would appear first as little sparkles of light, just kind of circling around the room and forming spirals, and then eventually landing on the floor and morphing into these three little white extraterrestrial beings. So as they would be flying around the room and circling and spiraling, almost like doing somersaults in the air, very pretty patterns, they thought of those little sparkles as fairies.
Yeah.
And they would tell their mother, oh, you should come in some night and see the fairies. They're so pretty. They're wonderful.
Right.
They're lighted. They're lovely in the dark room. And the mother would say things like, well, that's very nice, dears, but fairies are just for children. So if I came into the room, they probably wouldn't show up.
Right.
The mother
she's probably
had
right.
no clue, I think,
Yeah.
about
But
all
she's
this
probably
sort of
right. They
thing.
might not show up.
They might not if they were extraterrestrials too. So she was always taken for her experiences by these three little white beings. And they were like the little gray beings, except that they had round eyes, not the big black oval eyes,
Right.
but the round eyes, and they had some whites in their eyes. So their eyes moved and they had expressions.
Okay.
And both of these girls really liked them. They even had love for them. However, sometimes she would be taken by them, whom she liked, to physical examinations and on board the craft, the spacecraft, and different procedures that she didn't necessarily like. But other times, along with the physical things that were happening, she often was taken into another room after a physical checkup. I think she became to look at it as, oh, they're really checking a lot of my body systems. They want me to be all right. And if there's anything going wrong physically, they would fix it.
Right.
They would heal it. Took some regressions to
get to that.
realize that that's what was going on. But she'd also be taken into another room on each one of those occasions, and either seeming to be in a place of learning, she called it the library, even though there weren't any books, but it obviously was a place of learning. And she would sit at a console sort of arrangement with a barrel-shaped chair, and then her feet in almost like foot plates. And that was connected to a screen that she said is a combination between a television screen and a computer screen. Although she didn't know about computers when she was a child,
Right.
and started having those experiences. And there was always this very tall, white, thin being who became her mentor. I mean, she didn't realize in childhood that he would continue through her adult life to be her special teacher and mentor. And he turned out to be the being who did years and years of channeling through her too when she was here on Earth. So that was always a very interesting, positive experience. And
did she publish these channels, or did she?
No, she didn't publish them. I told her that maybe someday I would like to collaborate with her because they're very, very interesting from an extraterrestrial point of view. And she said, well, I don't know, I'll have to think about it maybe someday. And of course I've been extremely busy since I last saw her, which was probably about 2001. So I haven't gotten back with her about that, but I still think that would be a good project to do. So anyway, after she came, more people I didn't advertise it, they just somehow found me. I think there's some guidance in this sort of thing. And I began also to be invited to speak at different groups and conferences. Again, I never sought this.
Right.
And then I would mention the regression work I was doing with people who had extraterrestrial encounters, and very often there'd be somebody, maybe 2 or 3 even, from any given audience who'd come up to me afterwards and say, well, I would really like to work with you because I've been having
Right.
these peculiar things happen too. So it just grew, and here we are now 24 years later at this point,
Yeah.
and there have been at least 1,300 separate individuals whom I've done regressions with to their extraterrestrial encounters. And some of those people have been able to do lots of them because they live within an hour or so
Okay.
of where I'm located.
Right.
And so some have done 20 regressions, some
Wow.
30 or 40 or 50. So that's a lot of material.
Yeah.
Probably about 2,500 regressions.
Wow.
I've kind of lost track, but
Wow.
I
So
estimate
1,300 individuals, and then another, counting all the sessions that they've done, could up over well over 2,000. You're saying
Right.
regressions.
So it's
Wow.
been important, and I have found that
And that's
these
just related to the ET subject.
just the ET.
Wow.
Yeah, I've done many, probably a few thousand past life regressions too, and I always come back to being a regular therapist. So I also work with many people who have nothing to do with these subjects or don't ever wonder about past lives. So that's a very nice balance for me.
Like
Sort
people
of-
who want to quit smoking or
Oh, you quit
relationship
smoking,
problems.
they have
Or,
their marriage problems or children problems, or they're depressed or they're anxious. Work with a lot of
or
anxiety-prone
stuff
people.
that when they were childhood stuff that might come
Yes,
up.
very often have to bring the childhood that they've had into it because it does have its effect.
Right.
So anyway, it's very interesting, and I must say my favorite part of this wonderful work I'm privileged to do is working with the people who've had the extraterrestrial encounters. Now, in many cases, those encounters they've had are with really special beings. They're, I would say, highly developed, highly spiritual beings. Many of them seem to come from other dimensions of reality, definitely different frequencies. Some of them are glowing beings. Some of them look like a person, sort of, with a glow around the edge, like we have the auras, but theirs really shows. And sometimes it might be a body in the middle of maybe a big oval or general shape like that, which is totally glow. It's glowing light. And then when you look in toward the middle of all that glowing shape, there seems to be more of a dense sort of center, and it is a being.
Okay.
And then you can begin to see, as you look further, that, oh yeah, there are eyes,
Oh, wow.
and maybe a tiny suggestion of little holes for nostrils, maybe
Right.
a suggestion of a mouth, but the eyes are the part that usually stand out. So those beings come to people
Right.
and take them to a whole variety of really inspiring experiences, very highly spiritual experiences. So many people are learning in this whole big group that we would call extraterrestrial because they don't seem to be from here.
Right.
There's a huge variety of these beings that have come through the regressions that I've done.
Well, you mentioned it was not Andromeda or the
Antares.
Antares. Can you name some of the other beings that maybe have come through, or people have had experiences? Are they able to describe which part of the galaxy or where?
Most of the beings who appear in the regressions that I do don't give that information. They don't give themselves a name, or they don't say the name of their planet,
Okay.
or they'll say, if the person asks them, you know, where are you from? What planet do you live on? They'll say something like, well, we don't have a name for our planet. We don't have names for each other. We don't have names for anything because we're completely telepathic. We don't need to name each other or name our place or name anything. We all are in tune and we all understand. That's one thing that many beings have said in these regressions. And some of the beings have said, when the person asks,
Right.
have said, well, we have a name for our planet, but it wouldn't mean anything to you.
Okay.
You've never heard this name. You don't have it on your star maps.
Oh, wow.
So,
Wow.
and maybe they'll mention it or maybe they won't.
Right.
But they, and the same with giving a name to themselves. However, there are some exceptions to that. And some of the beings have told some of my clients that they are Arcturians. For instance, they're from Arcturus. Or others will say they're Syrians from Sirius.
Right.
Or they'll say they are Pleiadians from one of the Pleiadian planets. So occasionally they do, and Andromedans as well.
Yeah.
But usually there just isn't a name
Okay.
given. And most often in all these regressions, I must say, the person is fascinated seeing the beings and realizing what they're doing, but they don't even think to ask who they are.
Right.
It just doesn't come up for them or where they're from, nor does it occur, apparently, to the beings to give that information. But one of the very interesting things about these regressions is that when a person has been taken and is on what we assume or think is a spacecraft, certain procedures might be going on, and the person obviously is wondering why they're doing this particular thing, especially a physical examination kind of thing. And so I will typically say in the regression, I'll say, would you like to know why they're doing this particular procedure? And the person will usually say, yes, I would like to know. So then I say, well, you can ask them and tell them you really would like to know, or that you have a right to know what's happening to you. And you can do it out loud with your words to them. The beings are right around them. Or you can just do it with your thought, whichever you want. And some people actually say it out loud, some do it in their thought. And almost every time one of my clients has asked, they do get an answer. Now, they get it in their mind. The beings are communicating telepathically to them, so they hear inside their minds. They hear the answer. They don't tend to hear a voice.
Okay.
But the answer comes in English, or for people who are German, for instance, they would hear it in German. It seems to be that these beings can do that.
Yeah.
We don't know exactly how, but they
Right.
do some pretty amazing things. And the answers so far have always made sense. They're very quick answers, they're very simple, they're very brief, maybe just a few words, but they really make sense,
Can you give us an
connected with
example?
what seems to be happening to the person
Okay.
bodily. And that's true in terms of teaching. You see, a lot of people who are taken on these experiences, they are ushered into various rooms, each room for a certain purpose. One might be for a physical checkup. One might even be for the beings healing a person who has a condition to be healed. And the person may not have even thought about extraterrestrials healing them.
Right.
They haven't even asked for help. But these beings, know. They know a lot about our bodies,
Right.
probably more than most humans, even medically trained people do. And they know how to heal, and they have very good ways of healing. Quite a number of my clients have been healed of something quite serious or painful or both. And sometimes it seems to be done by laying the hands of these beings over the body of the afflicted person, and that they can feel warmth or they can feel energy coming to that area that needs healing. Once in a while, it seems to be hands-on healing by one of the beings who has typically much longer, thinner fingers, and maybe not as many fingers as we have, depending on the beings. But the healing still comes from those hands right into the body. Sometimes also the healing seems to happen by an area almost like a beam of light, a broad area of light coming down to the person who's lying on a medical type of table. And they just simply just relax and soak it in.
Wow.
And the healing happens. Or sometimes a couple of people have described that it seems almost like a machine-like wand that has been starting at the feet and rolling up the prone body and over the top of the head. And as it's rolling up, it is emitting some kind of frequency, often light as well, which is healing whatever that condition is.
Wow.
And sometimes the healing seems to be happening by what appear to be laser lights. There have been some really spectacular healings that have happened.
And the descriptions, I can imagine that's, what people are describing. Do you see an overlap with the descriptions? I guess two-part questions. One is, can you describe some of the reasons that you said they get telepathically these messages in their head, that they get the reason why they're going through this? And then maybe have you seen overlaps with different people describing the same types of technology, the same types of reasons?
Well, each person whom I've regressed who's been healed has a different kind of condition to be healed. In one case, it might be a liver problem or a spleen problem or a kidney problem. In others, it might be a serious injury in the back or a knee that is continuing over time to have repeated problems, or a problem with the foot, or could be a more temporary thing like a strep throat or a bad cold or something
like
like that.
Ear infection, you said.
Ear infection. Yeah. So, I mean, just a lot of variety has come up, and a lot of variety of these healing techniques. But I would say that the placing of the hands is very typical of the being with what feels like heat and energy coming out
almost like
into the body.
We have in China, I don't know if you've seen the Qigong masters
Yes.
who actually apply their hands, and there's this one video online where there's a tumor someone's lying on, and they have a ultrasound of the tumor, and these Qigong masters are doing the Qi, and they're literally disintegrating this tumor in real time.
Yes.
Everything. So it sounds like maybe there's some kind of Qigong magic going on there.
Yes, whether we would call it that or not. I've been to China to some of the traditional Chinese medicine hospitals and clinics, and I've seen the Qigong masters do amazing things.
Wow.
And then we would, those of us who were on this trip would get to experience standing at one end of the room with a Qigong master at the other end, sending, and with our backs to him, sending this energy, and we would feel it maybe 20 feet away.
Wow.
in our bodies. Amazing. And we saw a Qigong master doing some remarkable healing things that we would never even think of. So yes, I think that
Maybe that kind
they
of
do a lot of that energy healing. The most remarkable case, well, there are two of them actually, involving healing. One is a woman who, young woman, who in the 1970s was suddenly missing from her job for 3 whole days. And they didn't know where she was. They kept calling on the telephone. She kept not answering because she wasn't really there. She had been taken, we found out in the regression,
Oh, wow.
that she had been taken early in that process by extraterrestrial beings, had been taken onto a craft. And the first major thing they did was put her into a sliding prone position and sort of slid her into a machine that she later recognized would be very much like our MRI machines.
CAT scan, yeah.
And they were scanning her body. And at the time when this was happening, and she didn't remember until years later when she did the regression with me, but at that time she did not know about MRI machines.
Right.
But now she realizes, it was very akin to that. And then after they had scanned her to determine what was the problem, by the way, she didn't even know she had a problem,
Right.
but she did have one.
Okay.
Then they took her into another room and suspended her in a lying down position up in the air a number of feet, maybe about 6 feet off the floor. She wasn't suspended on anything. She was just suspended in the air.
Wow.
And for most of that 3-day period where she was gone from her home and her work, she received thin laser beams coming from all directions, including from underneath. That's why she was suspended.
Wow.
And there were always some of these extraterrestrial beings watching her, making sure everything was all right. And these beams were doing a tremendous amount of healing work. They were different colors, each one. And she realized in the regression that one particular being who was standing near her head and talking to her, she was slightly higher up in this suspended position, but she recognized in the regression that, he was one that she'd been with many, many times. And he was always very kindly and very helpful. And he didn't look like a person, but she liked him.
Right.
And he affirmed, yes, indeed, we have been together many times, and it is time for us to really give you some very important help. He told her, right then and there while this was going on, that she had a very rare blood disorder, and that she didn't know it, and nobody knew that about her.
Right.
But they knew it, and they were sorry that they couldn't clear up the damage that had already happened. But what they were doing with the laser beams was arresting it so it would not continue to develop.
Wow.
Because if it would continue to develop, she would develop leukemia for sure.
Oh, wow.
So they were arresting it at the stage of development that it already had been, so that it would never progress further and she would never have to get leukemia. So that was a wonderful service that they did.
Yeah.
So she was returned
Right.
to her wooden floor after 3 days. And when she came to with another one of these telephone calls from work, she thought, well, that's strange. If I've been here for 3 days on the floor, I should be sore. I should be really uncomfortable, and I'm not.
Right.
She'd gone to sleep on the sofa 3 days earlier, but when she was returned to the floor right in front of the sofa. But and then several years later, she went to an earth doctor here on Earth, and he determined, for the first time in her life, he had determined that yes, indeed, she had a very unusual blood disorder. But as he followed her through the years leading up to now, he said the most remarkable thing is that this blood disorder has not developed into leukemia. We can't imagine why not.
Right.
Because everyone else with this rare blood disorder has always ultimately developed leukemia and they've died.
Interesting.
So
Wow.
it's one of those medical mysteries.
Yeah.
But we know why that
Right.
was, that
Well,
it didn't develop.
I guess the bigger question is why would they choose her, and why do they let other people with this blood disorder develop the leukemia? And
Well-
and all of the people who have had these healing things happen to them, why are they chosen and not the others?
Yeah, why her?
And why her? Yeah.
Well, I think it has a lot to do with the fact that she had already been having experiences with them
Okay.
in childhood right on up. And not only that, but her mother had been having extraterrestrial encounters.
Okay.
Although she would, and she talked about the beings a lot, the mother did, but she would never agree to having a regression, even though
yeah.
her daughter kept saying, "Come on, Mom,
Right,
do
right.
it," you know. And but she obviously was having encounters with these beings, and people who are involved in this usually, as far as I know, have families that also have some members who are involved in this sort of encounter, generations. So this woman's mother had been involved, although she never quite faced the whole
Right.
reality of it.
Sure.
But she remembers seeing extraterrestrial beings in her room, and she was seeing shadow people frequently, and she had some odd missing time experiences, and which we could put together with at least probable extraterrestrial encounters. And she thought that maybe her mother, that would be my client's grandmother,
Right.
had had experiences. And then my client had 2 sons, they're both grown up now, and one of those sons very apparently has had lots of extraterrestrial encounters. The other one probably hasn't. So it does seem to run in a genetic line very frequently. So the people who get healed, I think, so far, this can change with learning more,
Right.
but they seem to be people who already have been having a series of encounters with those beings.
I see.
And at a certain point, they do get healed by the
Okay.
beings if something develops that is not the way it should be with that person. The
And there's-
beings will heal it.
There's really no way to tell how far back these in the bloodlines.
No, unfortunately, if we could somehow interview the
The ETs
great-great-parents and the great-great-great-great-great-grandparents and so forth, it would be wonderful. Very often, when I ask that question of anybody
Yeah.
who seems to be having encounters, they'll say, yeah, one of my sisters is having these experiences, or, well, my mother won't quite admit it exactly, but I remember her saying
Right.
some things about unusual beings coming into the room at night, or giving strong clues
Right.
that she too has had experiences. Now, one of the really exciting things to me is when there is an encounter that happens and it is witnessed. Sometimes that happens.
Wow.
I think it's quite rare because these beings typically will, what we call, switch off anybody accompanying the person.
Right.
And,
Like the Men in
and that could be
Black.
a whole group of people that are all sort of stopped in mid-sentence or
Right.
mid-action, and just out of consciousness, they're not harmed.
Right.
They're just made unaware. Or it could, and very typically, be the person sleeping in the room or sleeping in the bed with the person who has this encounter, and that other one is switched off, just out of total awareness. Or it might be a car full of people that is stopped when driving along, even in a populated area or a rural area
Right.
would be very common too. And the car motor comes to a stop. Hopefully the driver pulls off the road, or at
Right.
least well over to the side. And everyone else in the car is switched off, and this one particular person is taken for the encounter.
Wow.
And that
So
seems to happen
does
all the time.
Time itself stop, or do just people black out, or how does it described? Because it sounds like in some cases they could actually manipulate time itself.
They can manipulate time. I have no clue about how they do it.
Okay.
But I think it's evident that they do that. But many cases, the person will be missing a period of time
Okay.
and realize after an encounter that, oh, an hour and a half has gone by. Where did that go?
Right.
Or 2 hours,
Right.
typically, sometimes more. And then the encounter has happened in the meantime. But there are situations, including one that I had myself, where the beings already planned to manipulate time to the extent that I would be placed back down on the freeway I had been driving on. My car and I were taken. And I would be placed back only about 1 minute after I had looked at the clock to see what time it was. And then this event happened.
Can you
And so
describe
I
the
didn't
event?
miss 2 hours.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, but it was 2 hours that was gone, or
Yeah,
that
it was
felt
at least an hour and a half, probably more like 2. Yeah.
Can you give us more details? What happened?
Yes, well, it really was a very fascinating experience. And my car and I were driving
Yeah.
around midnight back from Goleta, north of Santa Barbara, California, coming down the 101 freeway right by the ocean. And I had noticed that, well, this is strange. I don't see any headlights coming or taillights ahead of me or headlights in back of me. And that went on for a number of miles. And I thought, well, that means that I'm the only car driving on this part of the freeway. And it's Friday night. People often come up north
Yeah.
or go south for the weekend, and it's only around midnight. I mean, that's really peculiar. Well, okay, I'm all right. And then I saw a round flash of light, perfectly circular, off the coast over the ocean. It was a very overcast night, so I couldn't see the ocean, but I knew it was there.
Right.
I had done that trip many times. And so this big round flash of light, just that long, just lasting 1 second, and then gone. I thought, well, that's really peculiar. What was that? You know.
Yeah.
And then I noticed a few miles later that there seemed to be a big arc of light over the hills to my left. That's to the east. And I knew that territory. I had had many trips up there previously, and I knew that there were no towns over there.
You
or
say arc of light,
stores or
something coming
anything.
over the horizon, kind of, or
Yeah, there were hills,
Right.
and it was like over the top of the hills
There's a light.
seemed to be this very even arc of light that was whitish greenish, which is exactly the color of that
that flash.
flash that had happened. Wow, that is unusual. I wonder, I mean, I know there are no towns or houses over there. I wonder what that light is. Well, it's okay. I'm still all right. And saying to myself.
Right.
And then I noticed that there was what I thought was a big trailer truck, half on the freeway and half off the freeway, over at the side, and there were lights around the bottom. I had that impression, and people walking around the lights. So I assumed, just a regular old natural earth human thing,
Right,
that
construction
it was a
work or
truck that had a flat tire or something, and they had the flares up. That must have been what was causing the light, the flares you put on the road, and people walking around to check and maybe work on this truck. And then just at the other end of the truck, there, in my windshield, just past the edge of the truck, which, by the way, seemed like an especially long truck compared to other trucks here on Earth. And then there was a big flash of light across my windshield, as if it was right outside the windshield. It was sort of a peachy, pinky color, and it had a little, what looked like a ribbon or something stretched taut on an angle across it. And the most striking thing, even though that was remarkable enough, but the most striking thing was at the same instant, the light, the ribbon, there was a crack in my windshield right in front of my face, in front of the driver's wheel. And it was in the shape of like a complicated spider web. And so my inkling was to slow down and back up and talk to those people back there at the other end of this big truck and say, what are you doing? My windshield has been cracked.
Right.
But I didn't do that because this big resounding voice in my head, just like that time earlier, said to me, really insistent, saying, no, don't slow down, don't stop, don't go back, just keep driving, driving, driving all the way home. Still had probably a 2-hour or 2.25-hour trip before being home. Well, what I realized in the regression that I did 3 weeks later to that event, and I was regressed by somebody really excellent in doing regressions, Dolores Cannon.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
She's
done thousands of regressions.
I've actually reached out to her to be part of this.
Oh, good.
But I haven't got a response yet, but hopefully.
Well, she's wonderful.
Yes.
And very talented and extremely interested in finding out as much information as she can. And she said, Barbara, if anything interesting comes out of this, do I have your permission to use this in the book I am just completing? So I said, yes. So in the regression, it showed that that truck wasn't a truck. It was a UFO, and that the lights around the bottom weren't flares, that they were light emitting, that whole energy system emitting from the bottom of that craft. And in reliving it in the regression, I said, can we just slow this down so I can see these people?
Right.
Well, they weren't people. They were other kinds of beings, extraterrestrial beings. So then at the end of that truck, before the flash of light and the crack in the windshield, my car and I still felt like I was driving, but the motor wasn't on any longer. And we were being drawn up in what seemed like a diagonal beam of light, and then straight up into a craft. I didn't see the craft from the outside, craft up in the air, and slid onto a floor, and lots of little beings came around, probably 20 or 30.
Wow.
Really short beings, sort of silvery blue, and they had big almond-shaped eyes that looked to me like a cobalt blue. So like the little grays, except more silvery bluey. And they were so curious that as soon as my car and I were there in this enclosure, which I assume was a craft, they came running from all directions, climbing all over the car, up on the hood of the car, looking down through the windshield upside down, and looking in all the windows, climbing up on the hood. And then, even though I know I had locked the doors, because I don't like to drive alone at night with unlocked car doors,
Yeah.
even though I know they were locked, because I checked it just before I left, two beings opened the door and came in and sat on the passenger seat, right on top of my candies and my purse that I had out there. And two others opened the driver's door.
Wow.
And they were so curious and funny and cute. I mean, I was just fascinated with them. No fear at all.
That's why you like that little statue over there.
Yeah, maybe that helped to
Yeah.
acclimatize myself to. And so then I was drawn out of the car and sort of ushered and floated upright across that room that we were in, which served as sort of a garage. I figured there wasn't anything in the room, and then through a door with a rounded top into another room. And in that room, I could see there was a very straight column coming from the ceiling to a platform, about a 1 foot high platform, and a chair, very straight chair with straight arms attached to that platform. And at the top of the platform, I was being ushered across to that chair. I could see that there was a metallic object which reminded me of a beehive shape of metal, and it looked like different pieces of metal. Reminded me of a vegetable, not a sieve, but one of those things that you put in a pan and steam vegetables in.
Okay. Yeah.
With sort of
Oh, right, right.
sliding
Yeah, yeah,
pieces. Forgotten what the name of that object is. It reminded me of that. And then so they sat me in this chair, put my arms on the arms of these very straight arms, and then brought down the helmet, fitted it all around my head, and particularly where my head dents in a little bit at the temples. And then I felt a current coming into my head through my whole body, but especially in my head, like an electrical current. It didn't hurt, but it was a very noticeable feeling. And of course, I wondered what was going on.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, these little beings sort of formed a semicircle around me. And they were looking up at these big eyes and juggling each other out of the way so they could get a closer look, and looking around the sides. And I was looking at them with absolute fascination.
Right.
And again, I think they were adorable and almost like innocent,
Yeah.
childlike,
Yeah.
it seemed to me. And although they were obviously involved in doing something quite serious.
Yeah.
And then I noticed that behind them, there was a very tall white being, very tall, very thin, bigger eyes that were more square with rounded corners, it seemed. It came around the sides a little bit. And he started talking to me, and he knew my name. And he said, Barbara, you're probably wondering what we're doing. Yes.
Yeah.
And he said, first of all, I want you to know we're not harming you in any way. You will be perfectly all right, which was reassuring. And then he said, what we're doing is, and then he paused and he said, I'm going to use a word that you now understand. We are downloading information from your brain. And we're not removing your information or your memories in your brain. We're just making a copy of them, so those memories and that information will be intact inside yourself. And then Dolores, who was regressing me, pitched in and said, Barbara, ask him what they do with this information.
Yeah.
And I asked him, and he said, we broadcast it. And Dolores said again to me, lying there having the regression, ask him, who listens to it. And he said, tell her that, so in other words, he was even aware of her asking questions.
Yeah.
Even though this encounter had happened 3 weeks earlier,
Right.
which gets into a whole
Right.
interesting question about time.
Yes.
Time really is, if there is any time. And so he said, well, we broadcasted in signals similar to your radio signals or telephone signals or television signals, and people can dial into them if they want to. So those other beings from other places, if they're interested in this information, they will tune into that particular frequency. If they're not interested, they just won't,
Right.
just like you humans do. And then she said, well, what is this information about?
Yeah.
And he said, well, what we want to know is 3 things. With all the people that me, works with who've had experiences with beings that come from somewhere else, we want to know what those people knew before they found out more details in regression. What was their whole impression and opinion before really knowing the specifics? That's one thing. And we want to know what specifically they learned in the regression. And then thirdly, how the whole thing of having these kinds of encounters and experiences is affecting them in their lives.
Wow.
So some of these beings apparently are very, very interested in that. And some of them couldn't care less and don't tune in. And then Dolores kept asking questions. And he, after a few more, he said, she can just ask me directly. She doesn't have to go through you. So she, sitting in the room where we were doing the regression, which happened to be up in Laramie, Wyoming at the time, she would ask a question and he would answer it, but he'd answer it through me because she couldn't hear him.
Right.
It had to come through me. I was the one having the experience with him.
Yeah.
So this went on for, another hour and a half or
So
hour and a
Dolores
quarter.
stopped saying, Barbara, ask
Yes.
him this. He just
She
said,
just asked the question.
okay, hey, what's going on?
And he answered it.
Directly.
But he had to, but I was the only one who could
hear it.
hear his answer, so I'd hear it and
So
repeat it.
in essence,
out
you were
loud to him.
channeling
Yeah,
this
yeah,
being.
channeling a being. Yeah, that's right. Oh, thank you. I never thought of it that way. Yeah, I think you could say that.
Wow.
So that was wonderful, and he answered all kinds of questions about his type of beings and their planet, and lots of information. How do they know all that about this one person,
Right.
about me, and which I think is remarkable that
Did she ask
that he did know.
which part of the galaxy they were from? Or?
Yes, and a lot about life among their species and life on their planet in general. And he gave lots of details. And so after a while, Dolores said, well, we're going to have to finish now. I'm not sure if the audio tape she was taping on was running out or if her time was running out. But anyway, we'd been going a good long time. And she said, we're going to have to finish this. And then he volunteered, if you would like to have another discussion like this,
Right.
arrange to meet again like you did now,
Right.
and have questions ready.
Wow.
And I will be very happy to answer them. What an opportunity.
Yeah.
So about 2.5 months later, Dolores Cannon came to the Los Angeles area, which is only about an hour's drive from me. And so we arranged to meet where she was, and we did another regression, and we both this time had a long list of questions, which she read off and asked, and then he would hear this again. I didn't even have to pass it through to him. and then he answered, and I would give her the answer.
Did you have to recreate kind of the moment of the actual abduction or experience? Did you have to kind of walk through it to
What
get
we
you
did
back into that
very,
state?
very quickly, briefly, was to begin the session with relaxation, and then she said, we're going back to that experience on the 101 freeway when you and your car were taken,
Right,
and
okay.
had this long
was the
conversation
reference
with the
point.
being, and that opened the way to his, remotely from wherever he was at the
Right.
time, knowing that this was the opportunity
Wow.
to talk together again. So all of that information
Yeah.
that came from those 2 sessions is written in Dolores Cannon's book called The Custodians.
Oh, okay.
And
Yep.
it's the last 2 chapters of that book, which she calls Therapy for the Therapist.
Perfect title.
Right. And she
Or should
she
see
used-
therapy from the therapist
yeah,
and
yeah.
for the therapist.
From and for and within and around.
Exactly.
So she used the name Bonnie for me because at that time, in the early 2000s, I think this was, or
Yeah.
end of the 1990s, at that particular time, I didn't feel favorable about declaring in public that I too
Right.
was having experiences. Since then, obviously, I've gotten past that
Yeah.
sense of reserve about it. But so she calls me Bonnie, but it's all about my regressions and my experience.
Based on that experience and the 1,000+ regression,
Or
or 2,000 plus,
2,000, 2,500
Yeah.
probably.
plus regressions that you've done with other people, can you sum up what is this Earth experience? And I know that's a massive question to answer as the final question, but if there's some kind of overlapping sort of thing that you've gotten from all of your collective experiences, and a short,
Okay.
as short as possible way to wrap that up.
Earth and humanity seem to be extremely interesting to many, many of these extraterrestrial species. They know about us, even if we don't know about them. They have this remarkable ability, I think, of remote viewing and remote sensing, remote knowing. They know what's in our minds. They know what's in our hearts. They also see so much of what is going on. And they're very concerned. Many of these groups have expressed that. They're very concerned about planet Earth because we're destroying it slowly but surely. We're ruining life on Earth. And we just don't even pay enough attention to that. But they can see from their perspective. And some of them have even been on planets that were ruined and life had to move elsewhere, move on to other places to live in the cosmos. So they're so aware that Earth humans could be really ending the possibility of life on Earth. And they don't want to see that happen. Another aspect is that they're very interested in humanity because humanity has been influenced genetically by a lot of those different species. Many of those species claim to have responsibility for some of our characteristics. And this, of course, goes way back before our recorded history.
Right.
But I think, having heard of this from enough people, or enough extraterrestrials, I should say, by now, that I think that this is really true. I think it has merit. So each one of those species that ever, in eons of time, had some influence in creating certain aspects of the human race, it's kind of like we're their children who've gone far away, and they want to know how we're doing. And when they see how we're doing, they think it's really deplorable as a humanity. And they're particularly concerned with our nuclear capability. This is extremely serious, not only for us and all life forms on Earth, and even the Earth itself, but if we start setting off nuclear warfare or nuclear devices for any purpose, and even all the leaks that are happening and could continue to happen, that this pollution not only affects the Earth and the atmosphere around the Earth, but they know that it affects the entire solar system and even beyond our solar system. So they are at risk too.
Wow.
By our having all this nuclear capability. And combining that with that very unfortunate warlike, pugnacious tendency that so many humans have, not all, but too many of them do, that it could be so easy to use that nuclear proliferation.
Right.
And whether it's an accident or it's on purpose or for some political gain or to stop another war, I mean, we are just at the brink all the time of setting that loose.
Right.
So they're very concerned. And they also have been creating, many species have, of hybrid beings, part them genetically and part human. And they give many reasons for this. And one of them is that if their species wants to be able to eventually live on Earth, and I don't mean taking over the Earth, I've never felt that that is part of their agenda, but if they want to live here, some of them, and commingle and even help us, they would have to be partly human beings themselves. And then they talk about how we could have very wise ambassadors who are part extraterrestrial and part human, who could go from this planet to another and from another planet to here, that they could help us to get to know each other and understand each other. A lot of these beings would like to see us, humanity, really upgraded and be able to be more encompassing, more allowing, more accepting of our view of other kinds of beings, and to really be able to take our part in the cosmic community. They talk about a galactic federation that already exists for millennia probably, with many, many different species, maybe thousands of different kinds of intelligent species, congregating together and sorting out problems in the universe. And planet Earth is not part of that. Planet Earth is way off, out of it. We have not evolved consciously and spiritually enough to really participate in that. And they would like to see us do that. An interesting corollary to that is that a few of my clients have found in their regressions that they have been taken to council meetings where there's a whole congregation of many, many different types of extraterrestrial beings. And
Like something out
they,
of Star
usually
Wars.
with a couple of others or a few others, are delegates from Earth. So to some extent, it seems to be happening already. But they would like us as a whole planetary society to be very aware of participating intergalactically with these other species, and to participate peacefully and intelligently. No competition, no wars, no might makes right, but really to participate the way that many of them do.
Wow.
I would just like to mention quickly that there is this incredibly wonderful phenomenon going on Earth, the crop circle phenomenon.
Yeah, that's something we didn't
And
get
it
into.
seems like this really connects with all that we've been talking about.
Yes.
Not in the sense of personal encounters with individual extraterrestrials, but in being communicated with all over the planet, particularly in England,
Right.
where most of them have happened, but in most of the countries of the world, there will be appearing in the fields and have been these beautiful symbolic patterns laid down in crop fields and making very specific patterns, some of which we understand, we recognize as meaningful symbols here on Earth. And many of the patterns might be symbols that are meaningful to them, to whoever are the beings or whatever that intelligence is that lays down the crop circles. It definitely seems that we are being communicated with from out there, from other intelligences elsewhere. I think the most simplistic thing that we can think of is that they want us to know about them
Right.
in a very safe way.
Yeah.
They don't have to risk coming here or having their crafts
Right.
shot down or
Right.
being imprisoned and studied and dissected, as
Yeah.
some already have been.
Yeah.
It's a whole different way of letting us know about them.
Right.
It's so benign, and it's such a lovely phenomenon.
Yeah.
Pictorially, it's
Yeah.
so attractive, so pretty. It's geometrically very intelligent, spiritually very intelligent, even mathematically very intelligent, some of the crop circles. So it's a gift in the sense that it just, like an art form that's laid down in a field of growing crop and stays there as long as the crop is still growing there. It's even still there after the whole field has been harvested
Right.
and all the standing crop is gone, and even after the soil where the crop circle is laid down, when that's all tilled over in the fall, ready for the next season of planting. The reason it's still there is that the energy from the original crop circle is still there.
Wow.
And there are some people who have tested the same particular spot in the same field for as many as 8 years that I know of, maybe more. And even though new crops have grown up in that field,
Yeah.
in that very spot, for several more years, and the tilling between seasons, the energy from the original crop circle is still
Still
there.
there.
So something really unusual
Yeah.
and different is happening there.
Almost like, I guess, kind of when you harvest something new, you put that in the compost, and
Yes. Yeah.
and then that creates fertile soil will create something new. So maybe they're just planting new energies for something new to grow, not physically, but overall.
And when you think that these crop circles do happen mostly in England, but all over the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think there are many different ways that we are in touch with these extraterrestrial beings. And one of them is the encounters, even the extra dimensional, other dimensional beings who come. I think it's part of this whole huge universe-wise or cosmos-wide phenomenon. Crop circles are one
Aspect,
part of this
yeah.
whole thing. They're really trying to, I think with the sightings that they allow themselves to be seen in their crafts, the sightings, the encounters, knowing that people can find out the details of their encounters if they choose to through regressions. And they may be stimulating other people to put on these wonderful conferences, the UFO conferences and spiritual conferences in which this comes in to some extent. I think that they're doing quite a bit to upgrade humanity.
Yeah. Upgrade
And
humanity.
I really appreciate that. I applaud that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think we can take all the upgrading we can take. It would be a really good thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It definitely gives me something to film.
Yes, it gives
I'm
you
definitely fascinated
an
by
interesting topic.
Interesting topics that doesn't get enough attention, I believe.
Right.
That, for many reasons, which we won't get into at the moment, but yeah, there's not enough attention, put into this subject matter, and that's why we're here. That's what we're doing.
Yes, and it's a pleasure and a privilege, I truly feel, to be talking about this, to let more people know about this very real phenomenon that is going on, even if many people are not aware of it yet.
Yeah.
And hopefully they will be more.
Well, thank you for all the work you've been doing and you continue to do. You're a huge inspiration, and I'm so glad we got to have this conversation.
Well, me too.
And the regression, that was...
Yes, you had a regression.
That was intense.
Yeah.
So,
yes, that was good, and you did very well.
Yeah, so thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.